All right. So now we're up to the third chapter in the book, Supply and Demand Theory. If you've had microeconomics before, you probably were already taught supply and demand to some extent, maybe in high school even. So we're not going to cover chapter 3 in to a great extent. We're basically just going to cover some of the bits and pieces so that you understand supply and demand. You really can't talk about a lot without knowing supply and demand in economics. Supply and demand really rules a lot of things. If you've had microeconomics before, chapters 1, 2, and 3, what we've done so far, probably you did cover to some extent in principles of microeconomics. This is the end of that. After we get done with chapter 3, we're into macroeconomics. So these first 3 chapters are kind of the building blocks of economics, and then we can diverge, in this case, to macroeconomics. So that's where we're heading now. So basically what we're doing in this chapter is thinking about markets. And a market is just a very general concept that basically means it's a place where people come together to buy and sell things, a place where the producers and the consumers meet. Years ago, markets were physical, and now with the internet, of course, they're not necessarily physical. So if I go to Amazon.com, that's really a market. Amazon.com isn't one producer. Amazon is many millions of different producers that sell their products through Amazon. So the consumers are meeting in Amazon, the producers are meeting in Amazon, and Amazon.com, even though it functions like a business, is really a market. Likewise, Walmart is really a market as well because there's lots of consumers and then there's really lots of producers, right? It's not just Walmart brand products. Most of the products there are produced by some other producer. So we've got 2 sides of the market. We've got the producers and we've got the consumers. We can start with either one. It doesn't really change anything which one we start with. So why don't we start with producers? This is the supply side of the market. The supply side of the market. Okay? What are the things that determine how much a producer is willing to produce? There's a lot of things, right? Cost is a big one. But price is probably the most interesting one to think about. As the price changes, what happens to the amount the producers choose to produce. So the focus we'll have here is the effects of price on production. So that's the producer side of the market. Then on the other side of the market is the consumers. And this is the demand side of the market. And that term demand comes from the concept that the consumers want to purchase something. They demand the products, okay? And so again, what we're going to do is we're going to think about, our focus here will be the effects of price on willingness to buy. Effects of price on the willingness to purchase. Okay, so what we're doing is we're thinking about price, we're thinking about that relative to production and consumption. That's what we're really trying to do with supply and demand. And when we do supply and demand in the future, it'll get more complicated than this. We'll think about the effects of interest rates on the quantity of money saved and borrowed. Lots of things focus like supply and demand, but they don't necessarily have the general price and quantity makeup that maybe you're used to seeing with supply and demand. Okay, so let's erase that. And let's focus on just one of these. And I tell you what, let's start with demand. Okay, I was going to do producers because that's kind of how we got things going here. But demand, I think, is easier because you and I, we're both consumers. Everybody watching this video is a consumer, but not necessarily a producer. So consumers is a little bit easier to get your head around because we've all been there. We understand it pretty well. And when we use the term demand, we're referring to the curve. Okay? So demand is the relationship between price and quantity demanded. The relationship between the price and the quantity demanded, that's the price, okay? Kind of the key word here that people miss out on is this right here. Demand is a relationship, okay? And what I mean by that is demand looks at the effects of prices on quantity. Demand is not a number, okay? If I tell you the demand right now is 12, it's meaningless because demand is a relationship, okay? It's kind of like saying, if we wanted to graph something totally different, you don't need this in your notes, but if we're going to graph something totally different, maybe we want to think about the effects of height on weight, like that, perhaps. And the basic belief here is that height and weight maybe grow at an increasing rate. I don't know exactly what it looks like. Maybe more like this. Maybe it flattens out. And let's say we call this the HW curve. Okay? Well, then if you were asked, what is the HW curve, and I told you the HW curve right now is 6, notice that doesn't make any sense, right? This is a relationship. This is showing the relationship between these two numbers, okay? So this curve is not a number. Demand, likewise, is not a number. It's illustrating the relationship between two variables, okay? That's something that it can get kind of frustrating if you're trying to talk with somebody, especially if you guys end up taking upper level classes. You really need to understand that demand is not a number because it makes it a lot easier to communicate ideas, if you understand that. So what it looks at instead is the relationship between price and quantity demanded. Okay, and there's our numbers. Price, we all know what that is, so I'm not going to bother with defining it, right? Price is the price. We know what that is. And then quantity demanded is the amount purchased, the amount consumers want to purchase. So there's your number, okay? So if I say the demand is 7, that doesn't make any sense. But if I say the quantity demanded is 7, that makes a lot of sense. That means the consumers want to buy 7, okay? Demand is the relationship between these two variables, okay? So it's trying to see how there's an interaction between price and quantity demanded. And here's what we think it looks like. This is virtually always the case that demand will look something like this. It will be downward sloping, okay? And again, notice demand, it's not a number. It's showing the relationship between these two variables. So maybe this is the market for tacos. I just had tacos, that's probably why I'm thinking about it. And what we can do see is use the demand curve to help us see how the prices and the quantities are related. So maybe it looks like this, I don't know. Right? When the price is $4, consumers only want to buy 45, and as that price drops, they're willing to buy more and more. And that makes sense, right? If something is cheaper, I'm more likely to buy it. Other consumers are more likely to buy it as well. So this could be like, Taco Bell's demand curve from 2 to 3 p.m. on any given day, and then they can choose the price that maybe correlates with these given quantities. We do think demand is downward sloping or inversely related. The price and quantity are inversely related, and that's what the demand curve shows us. We have a name for that basic concept. We call it the law of demand. The law of demand simply states something that we already know. As the price declines, quantity demanded rises. As the price declines, quantity demanded rises. Okay, so price goes down, consumers buy more. Makes a lot of sense, right? Makes a lot of sense. So that's the demand curve. It can shift. So it may shift to the right, for example, which we might symbolize by saying demand with a little 2 next to it. What that means is demand is increasing. Consumers want to buy the products more than they did before. So for example, let's say that there's a video comes out of LeBron James eating a bunch of Taco Bell tacos. Well, then consumers might say, you know what, I want to be like LeBron James. I want Taco Bell as well. So the demand curve would actually shift. And what that would mean is, at any given price, for example, $4, there are now more consumers that want to buy that product than there were before. Okay? So demand increase means at any price, people now want to buy the product more than they did at the current price before. Okay? So again, if the price is $2, we can show that the amount that people want to buy rises. Okay? So demand can shift, it can increase, it can decrease. When demand increases, this is a confusing part that students miss sometimes. When demand increases, don't think it shifts up, think it shifts right. Okay? Because that's a shift towards more quantity. There are more questions missed by misunderstanding that than just about anything in this class. Okay? When demand increases, it increases to the right. You'll see why that's so important here in a bit. So that's the demand side of the market. Now let's think about the supply side of the market. Just like demand is a relationship, so is supply. So supply is the relationship. It's a graph showing the relationship between price and quantity supplied. Okay? And just like we defined quantity demanded, we can define quantity supplied. And there's a lot of kind of repetition here. Quantity demanded is the amount the consumers want to buy based on the price. Quantity supplied is the amount the producers want to sell. So let's put it this way. It's the amount the producers are trying to sell. Okay? And so what we think the supply curve looks like, we can jump right into it here. This is our quantity produced, our quantity supplied. This is our price curve, or rather this is our number, our price axis here. So as we go up, going towards a higher price. As we go to the right, we're going towards a higher quantity. So what do you think that relationship looks like? If the price goes up, how did the producers respond to that? Most of the time they're going to want to produce more, right? So as the price goes up, production rises as well. So as that price goes up, production rises as well. The reason for that is when the price is higher, it's easier to make a profit, so firms produce more units. So, for example, let's say I'm thinking about selling tacos and I'm a producer. And right now I can sell tacos for $1.70. I can't quite make a profit on that. But then I see the taco prices have gone up to $3. Now I can make a profit. Now I enter the market. Now there's more quantity supplied. Okay? Just like we had a law of demand, we've got a law of supply. And the law of supply suggests that as the price rises, quantity supplied increases. Okay, so we've got a pretty clear, easy to understand relationship here. All right, so we've got demand. We've got supply. The next part of this is putting it all together. All right, so part one was explaining supply and demand, the general basics of it. Part two is putting it all together, okay? And again, if you're looking in the book, we're not going to read this whole chapter. We're doing like the first half, roughly. So what we need to do now is put it all together. And let's start with an example here. And let's imagine that the price is very high, okay? Very high is going to be relative to something we haven't quite learned yet, okay? But let's imagine that the price is very high. So here's our supply, here's our demand. We can put them on the same graph because they're really showing the same thing. This is the price, and this is the quantity supplied or quantity demanded. Now, quantity supplied and quantity demanded can be at different values. Right? Quantity demanded and quantity supplied don't have to be exactly equal, but they're still both quantities, so we can show them on the same graph. So let's imagine that the price is really high for whatever reason. Let's say our price here in the market for tacos is $6. All right? point. So here's our market for tacos. And let's see what that's going to do. If the price is really high, as a consumer, do you want to buy a lot or a little if the price is really high? Probably very little, right? If the price is very high, you want to buy little. So what you're going to see here is the quantity demanded is low. QD, quantity demanded. Okay, so that's showing the amount the consumers want to buy. And then if we take that same $6 amount and look at the supply curve, that'll show us the quantity supplied. That's the amount the producers want to sell. That's the amount they're trying to sell. So what's going on here? Okay, let's put a couple of numbers in here to maybe help this point be more easily illustrated. The quantity demanded is 40 and the quantity supplied is 95. Okay, what that means is the producers have 90 tacos they're trying to sell. The consumers would like to buy 40. So what's going to happen? Well, what you basically have here is a problem. There's too much production or not enough consumption. We have a simple word for this. We call this a surplus. This is when the quantity supplied, simply put, is greater than the quantity demanded. There's too much production or not enough consumption. Okay, whichever way you want to put it, it's really saying the same thing. What would fix this problem? Okay, clearly this is a problem. This is not going to be good for the consumers, right? The consumers don't like this because they're saying, I don't want to freaking pay $6 for a taco. It's not good for them. Only 40 units are being sold, so there are consumers out there saying, you know, I'd like to buy a taco, but I'm not paying $6 for it. Even the ones that are buying it are probably not too happy because they're thinking, yeah, I wanted to buy this taco, but I wish it wasn't so expensive. So the consumers aren't happy. The producers aren't happy either, okay? Now they're getting a high price, but they're essentially throwing 55 tacos in the trash. They're producing 95, only can sell 40. So there's 55 tacos they can't sell. That's not ideal, is it? Right? If you're producing stuff and you can't sell it, that's not a good situation. So what do you think is going to happen? What do producers do when they've got products they can't sell? They drop the price, okay? And what you would see here is, as that price drops, okay? So maybe the price drops from $6 to $5 here. That's going to affect the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied. Price goes down, consumers buy more. That's the law of demand. Price goes down, producers produce less. That's the law of supply. So as that price drops, see, the surplus here is shrinking, right? It started out at 55, now we're down to 30. And it's going to continue to have a surplus until we get down to this ideal point right here. And here's where the surplus goes away. At that point, there's no surplus anymore, okay? So if there is a surplus, that means the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. To fix the surplus, the price needs to drop. And economists generally believe that this is a good indication that the government doesn't need to get involved with prices. Prices seem to calibrate already simply because of people's greed. The producers are trying to maximize profits. The consumers are trying to maximize their own utility. So they're going to be unhappy unless that surplus is wiped away for the most part. Okay? So the price is naturally going to calibrate towards this point here. That's a surplus. Okay. Just checking the video to make sure it's going okay. If videos get too long, YouTube has trouble with them, so just want to make sure we are good. All right, so the first example is a high price. The second example is a price that's too low. So let's see if we can think about this. So here's our supply and demand graph. And again, we're showing the market here for tacos, sticking with that example. And let's imagine that our price here is now 75 cents. So like a really cheap price for some tacos. Well, what's that going to do? If you're a consumer and the price is really low, you want to try to buy a lot. So we're going to have a really high quantity demanded here. Maybe the quantity demanded is 300. Okay, again, QD, quantity demanded, that's the amount that consumers want to buy. I know that represents demand because the price aligns with the demand curve at that quantity. Okay? If I look at the supply curve, that price is going to show me right here what the quantity supplied is. And maybe that's only 80. Okay? We call this a shortage. And this is when the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied. And let's think about this. Let's think about if this is going to be good or bad for the consumers or the producers. Let's start with the consumers. Do you think they're going to be happy or unhappy with this price and this situation? It's a little tricky. The answer is some might be happy, but others are unhappy. Okay? The ones that are happy are the ones that are able to purchase this item at such a low price. So you imagine like Taco Bell's doing some sort of promotion, I guess 75 cents isn't that cheap for Taco Bell. Well, let's say downtown Gringos. I'm picturing students in the future that are like eating hover tacos. They don't even know what like Gringos is. But let's imagine a nice taco place downtown like Gringos is selling tacos for 75 cents. You could imagine maybe that there's like a line out the door. People go in, they buy the tacos, and then Gringos sells out, all right? That's kind of the situation here. You got some people happy that are able to buy the tacos, but some that are unhappy because they're not able to get the tacos that they want. The consumers want to buy 300, but there's only going to be 80 produced. So there's going to be a lot of people here who are unhappy. They don't get the item that they want. So some consumers are happy, some are unhappy. Let's think about the producers now. Are the producers happy or unhappy? Most likely they're pretty unhappy with this outcome. They're satisfied, they're happy in a way because they were able to sell all of their tacos, but business's goal is to profit maximize. And if I'm running a taco stand and I sell 80 and I've got a bunch of people in line wanting to buy tacos, I'm not going to be real happy with myself. I'm going to say, I should have produced more tacos, or I should have increased my price. I really missed out on an opportunity today. Okay? So this is a situation where, again, things are going to happen to cause this to fix itself. If you're running a business and this is happening to you, you can imagine what you do. You would either produce more or raise the price. And what we'll see is those two things happen in unison. Because as that price goes up, the quantity supplied moves along with it. As production rises, as the price rises, so does the production. So, you might think if you've got a bunch of people wanting to buy tacos, you should have had a higher price or you should have produced more. Turns out it's going to be both because of the law of supply. Raise the price, raise the quantity simultaneously. As that price goes down, as the price goes up, the other thing that happens is the consumers want to buy fewer tacos. So maybe now they only buy 200. So the end result here is that as the price goes up, this shortage is shrinking, okay? And that shortage is going to persist until that price gets all the way up to that point where they're cross. Okay. So what we've seen so far, before we move to example 3, here's what we know. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of draw a dotted line across here. If the price is up here, we're going to have a surplus. All right? If the price is up here, we're going to have a surplus. So if the price is here, for example, there's a high price, then we're going to have a surplus. The producers are going to produce too much. The consumers are not going to buy enough of the product. Producers producing too much, they learn from that, they begin to drop the price. So that price is going to drop, okay? They'll learn that this is a bad idea, they'll start to drop the price. If the price is too low, if the price is maybe down here, all right, I can sort of see this is getting a bit confusing here with the two colors at once, but if the price is too low, now we're going to have too many people wanting to buy the product. We've got quantity demanded way out here and only this much production. We've got a shortage. If producers see a shortage, they raise the price. So here's what we can see. If the price is above this point or below it, it's gonna kind of gravitate it to that point. Okay. If the price is too high or too low, it doesn't matter. It's going to get pushed towards this price right here. Okay. And we call the third scenario here equilibrium. All right, so this is equilibrium. And this is the scenario where the supply and demand calibrate so that an equilibrium is reached. Okay, I'm putting PE and QE for the price and quantity equilibrium. And what that means is at QE, this is the quantity equilibrium, the quantity supplied is exactly equal to the quantity demanded. So imagine here again that we're looking at the market for tacos. You sell your tacos for maybe, I don't know, $3. You've got a quantity of 105. What this would mean is, if you set the price at $3, you sell every single taco that you produce, and there's nobody wanting to buy a taco who didn't get one. This is great for the producer, right? This is great for the producer because it means I'm selling every taco I have, but there's nobody left over in line. If I had had a higher price, I wouldn't have been able to sell them all. If I'd had a lower price, I would have had consumers wanting to buy more. I would have missed out on an opportunity. So at the equilibrium, it's perfect. I sell exactly as many as I produce. That is ideal. So the producers are happy. The consumers are also happy with this because everybody who wants a taco is able to get one at what appears to be kind of a reasonable price. Okay? All right? It's a reasonable price. You know, if you've ever gone to like a football game and they only sold, 5,000 seats. Like let's imagine the Braves a couple of years back were really bad. They didn't have many people going to the games. The price was too high. All right? And consumers that are at the game may be thinking, I wish this price wasn't so high. Even though they're willing to buy the ticket, they're not necessarily that satisfied with the outcome. Well, here they're going to be satisfied because they're going to have an idea that the producers are setting price at what is maybe a reasonable level. I know it's reasonable because there's a lot of people buying the tacos, and there's nobody left over that didn't get to buy the tacos. So it's a busy place that's able to sell them all. Best for the producers and best for the consumers as well. Okay, so this is ideal for both. So that's an equilibrium. The important thing to take away from this, okay, is first understanding how to use them, how to play around with them, because we're going to do that a lot in the future. But maybe the big realization you need to make here is when we talk about the equilibrium and we assume, in the future, I'm just going to draw a graph up here and I'm just going to say, okay, here's price and quantity, here's supply and demand, and let's imagine we're at the equilibrium. The reason we assume we're at the equilibrium, because as we just showed, if the price is above it, the price drops. If the price is below it, the price goes up. So the market adjusts to get really close to equilibrium all the time, right? It's not in anybody's best interest for it to be out of whack from equilibrium. So if it goes just a little bit out of equilibrium, it fixes itself very quickly. So the end result is most markets are pretty close to equilibrium most of the time. And that's why we often make the assumption that this is where we are. It's not always 100% accurate, but it's usually so damn close that it's really not worth arguing about. Most markets look almost like this, and that's close enough for our point, okay? All right, one more thing that I want to play around with. Let me check the video here, make sure we're good. One more thing I want to play around with is shifting supply and demand. If you take microeconomics, maybe you already have, but if you take microeconomics, you do a lot of this, so we're just going to cover it real briefly. What I want you to think of, and I mentioned this earlier, is an increase means to the right. When we're talking about supply and demand, they increase to the right. The reason why this is so important, here's where the mistake is often made. Supply curve, we're doing something in the future. This is not going to be in chapter 3, but something we do down the line. And I tell the students the supply increases. When I tell the students the supply increases, a quarter of them are going to want to shift this supply curve up and say, look, there's an increase. That's incorrect, okay? And you just have to remember that that's incorrect. An increase to supply means a shift to the right. And the way I like to help myself remember that, okay, and this is something that becomes really secondhand. I don't have to remember this anymore. This is something that when you're playing with supply and demand, you get really used to. But the reason it's a shift to the right is because that's a shift towards more production, towards more quantity. So when I say supply increases, what I really mean is production increases, a shift towards more quantity, okay? So when supply increases, that means a shift to the right. You just have to know that in the later classes. Just wanted to touch on that today. Well, that's all I'm going to do for the video. You guys have got to be teaching yourself at home. You've got to be reading the book. Supply and demand is something that's covered so often. You can probably find some other good videos out there. I'll post some practice problems like I've been doing in the past. Stay up to date. Send me emails. Send me questions. We got to work on this together because I know, to me, it's hard for me to teach this not in a classroom setting because I can't see you and I can't interact with you. So I don't know if you're moving along with me, if this is too easy, if this is too hard. It's really tough for me to tell. So I need your feedback, okay? Send me questions. Let me know if you have any concerns, something you don't understand. Post on the YouTube video, right? Post in the comment section below me right now, and I'll try to address them, or you can send me an email. I like posting on the YouTube video, though, because other students can then see your question and my response, so maybe everybody benefits from that. All right, so that's it for Chapter 3.